Las Vegas. This is NAB Show Live, produced by Broadcast B.
Good afternoon. This is NAB Show Live. I'm Brian Seth Hurst. I am the Chief Storyteller of Storytech Immersive, and we're here to talk about the state of the virtual reality industry. We've got a nice audience, and we've got some great panelists. We have Marcy Jastrow. Oh, by the way, I have worked with all of these people, so I'm a little prejudiced. Marcy Jastrow, who's head of the Technicolor Experience Center in Culver City. Irina Cronin, who is from Spout Reality. And Dan Saxton, who is from VR Live.
Nice.
So welcome, panelists. Great. So the one thing that has happened, there's a big difference between this year and last year, which is the technology. Last year, the floor was crowded, but there was just sort of emerging technologies. I'm going to start with you, Marcy, because the Technicolor Experience Center has to incorporate every new technology that comes along. So tell us a bit about the tech, and then we'll get to the technology.
Sure. So the Technicolor Experience Center is a hub for all immersive media for Technicolor. So it incorporates everybody from MPC, the Mill, Micros, research and innovation, and what we do is produce content and work within the different workflows and try to fill the gaps of what's missing for workflows. So we have a production stage where we will be shooting, so creating, iterating, and consuming.
So from my experience with you, because we produced My Brother's Keeper and we worked with you, and it was an amazing experience, but we tried a lot of new stuff.
Yeah.
And every time we came back to you, you were like, the commitment of Technicolor to the highest quality image, which, by the way, to be honest, is missing in a lot of VR.
Right.
So in terms of high quality image and high quality technology that is supporting the story, workflow, even sound.
Yes.
Where are we going? What are you seeing?
Well, I mean, I still think we're very early in the whole process, and I think that we're at a point where we're iterating quite a bit and seeing what's working and what isn't working. But what's been really interesting is the more conferences you go to, the more festivals, you see all the different content creators really trying to push the boundaries, going into episodic, going into high-end image, looking at game engine, interactivity, social. So I think that that's where it's all going to go, is more interactive and more social.
So, Irina, you come from the financial side of the industry and analysis, and this, I mean, what is the page we enlist in Facebook for you? Because I don't know how you do it, but there's like 10 articles a day. So where should people go, by the way, just to keep up, since that's what you do?
Wow, okay, so I'm basically a Facebook person, not Twitter. So there are a bunch of VR groups that are online on Facebook, and mine is a closed group, but if you request, I will let you in. There's about 8,000 people there. There's some other groups on Facebook as well, which are really great, and there's a Women in VR group. So I highly recommend Facebook being the place to get the news.
I mean, it is amazing. So let me ask you, because in the year that I have known you, we've worked together, and so much has changed. In terms of companies that are surviving right now, technology companies that are surviving, is there a shakeout coming? Because you have all these, no offense to you, but you have all these, like, VR Live, you're not going anywhere, but you have all these new live streaming cameras, you have all these people jumping in with new workflow and new technology, you have Metal that is, combining with Adobe Premiere, and you have 360 Heroes that has launching a new editing, stitching and editing software. There are so many choices.
Yes.
Is that going to shake out, and which technologies? Who wins?
Okay, well, basically, if you have to talk technology versus content, it's more of the content end, which there's going to be a huge shakeout, I think, coming up. A lot of the content people, companies, they're 3 to 5 person operations, and there's huge kinds of competition. Right now, it's going to get even worse. So in terms of technology, I think actually it's not going to be too much of a shake up or shake out. There's always room for more with tech as long as it's really good, okay? And the offering actually makes sense for the people who want to use it. Now, within those particular tech segments that they're targeting, there might be little shakeups there. But I think the opportunity for tech companies to come in with apps that specifically do jobs in VR and AR as well, there's tremendous opportunity.
So, as a producer, when we look into the story that we want to tell, what we're looking at first and foremost, after we figure out what we're going to tell,
Yes.
is what cameras. For example, tonight we are starting a new project here in Las Vegas. We have 4 different cameras to test because of the lighting in the facility. So, this is different. We produce cinematic VR. We work with Marcy to produce cinematic VR, and we'll talk about hacking in a minute. But you guys shoot live, and everybody, I mean, if you walk on the floor, there are, in Central Hall, having nothing to do with VR, except maybe that Jaunta's in there, you have so many live streaming technology options. And then over here in the VR Pavilion, which, by the way, is packed. I mean, it is packed. You can't move in there, so that just tells you. Over last year, it was packed, but it was small. This year, it's packed, and it's a lot of people, and the content sessions are really packed, the conference part. So, in shooting in VR Live, how do you choose the camera? You've got Ozo, you've got John. How do you, and who do you work with?
It's so dependent on the lighting of the event, as you know. I mean, we've gone through stadiums, clubs like the Roxy on Sunset, in Hollywood. Events like this, it always depends on really the lighting and what the connectivity is here and how that camera reacts to that connectivity. There's a lot of research that we've had to do to figure out the best solution for that situation.
So while we're talking tech, let's talk sound. I've got some experience here. We were very experienced in that they gave us, literally gave us, Scott Gershon, who's a sound designer, and immersive sound and immersive audio. Some people say it's the lost stepchild, but here you are in a concert environment. How do you handle sound in that environment?
It's when people are watching concerts in VR, it's so new that they're not used to even the visual yet. So when you throw in like spatial sound, it really freaks them out. They're used to they're used to stereo sound. So if you, like we did U2, at the Roxy, so you're in the front row, and we did that. So if you're in front of the guitar, you hear the guitar from the amp. But if you're over at the other camera that's in front of the bass, you hear more of the bass. If you turn your head, the stage is behind you instead of in front of you, all these types of things. But when we do that for people, it freaks them out. It's like, it's too much for them to handle.
So how did you find that out? I mean, we have...
Just demoing those things for people, and they go, oh, this is weird. Kind of like, I don't know, it's a weird balance of their senses that they don't have yet.
Yeah, well, I also think there's a constant feedback loop, right? So the more you're demoing this content, the more you're learning from the feedback from the people, what's working and what's not working.
Yeah.
And then you incorporate it in the next iteration of what it is that you're doing. But I do believe sound is something that we haven't even tapped into yet.
Right.
I got to tell you, just in terms of a narrative experience, you have choices. You have microphone choices, you have sound design choices, and not a lot. I don't think, you've got all these formats, right? I mean, you have to deliver in stereo, you can deliver in 5.1, you can deliver in ambisonic, you can deliver in binaural, right?
Yeah, but the bigger problem with that is when you do these deliveries, you're sending the content file with just the video, and then you're sending a separate sound file. It's never married until it gets to the platform. So those types of things have to be fixed and managed.
Yeah.
To some sort of standards.
You were asking about what tech is really going to make it in the future with VR and AR. It's going to be those that do production as it goes along. So you have to be able to marry the audio with the video and anything else that is happening as you're actually making it.
Mm-hmm. Wow. Well, I can tell you that right now, because of the platforms, you can't really do that. It's just not there yet. So when are we getting there?
Again, we're very early. I think everybody's learning, and I think that, we need to push those standards, and it's with any new technology that comes out. Is
there a standards body for VR? Should there be if there isn't?
I think it might be early for that, but I do think we have to start looking at what standards are. What are the best practices?
So you have NTSC and you have all over the world there were different television standards, different sound standards. There is a body that determines sound in 7.1 and all of that. But it just occurs that we don't have that. Are the platforms getting together to have this discussion, like Vive and Oculus?
Yes, they are actually right now, the Kronos group, and there's a couple of other that are maybe not officially doing it, but unofficially, but Kronos is the official one right now.
So is Kronos the standards body for both audio and video in VR?
They're trying to do everything. Yeah, but I mean, they're not going to come out with the actual standards. They're talking about what those standards should be.
Wow, that's interesting because there's nothing that's like regulating that.
Not yet.
And you have this continuum, right? You can do 360 on your phone, you can go to immersive, you can go up to Dome, and now, I don't know if anybody read today in Mashable, but Sony's IMAX VR installation in Los Angeles has been very successful. They've had like 15,000 visitors in like 3 months or less, and it's not even like marketed.
Right. Well, I mean, I think that's the whole point, right? So it's still early. We live in it, right? We're wrapped in it every day. So we think that it's much bigger than it really is. But then when you look at it, it's still very small.
Yeah.
And so to create any standards or to do anything really structured right now probably might not be the best idea. But I think as we keep moving forward and we keep looking at new content and we keep seeing what's happening with the content, that's when standards will start getting...
So let's talk about the platforms, since we're talking about standards. You've got HTC Vive, and it's got controllers. You've got Oculus, it's got the touch controllers. Now you've got mobile, which has got, for Daydream they have a controller, and the new Samsung Gear VR has a controller, and then you, of course, have cardboards and things like that. So these platforms are essentially competing, and they're getting better and better. Where will this happen? How will that go? You had, and I don't know if there are different standards. They have beta over here and VHS over here, or HD DVD here and Blu-ray over here. Are we set up for that happening?
Well, I think the competition is going to get even bigger starting this year.
That's hot. That's good for content creators.
So we've got Microsoft coming out with their headsets through Asus, Acer, and others for $299 plus. That's mixed reality. Not at the
Explain mixed reality.
Okay, so it's going to have both VR and AR components. Right now, we're not really sure whether you can seamlessly go between VR and AR.
So AR is an overlay, because for those that don't know, augmented reality is an overlay of what you're seeing. It's the picture that you're seeing.
Well, augmented reality, you can see what you're seeing right now and then put an object or character in front of you.
Which you may or may not be able to interact with.
Right.
Sometimes it's just information.
Right.
Okay.
So that's Microsoft, but then you have LG, you have Qualcomm, you have, I won't name the other ones that will probably have improvements coming up from the current ones that we have. So, and the standards are going to change according to how product or content would be made for those. I think by next year, in terms of the competition that we have now, no one will remember what's happening.
Wow.
I think it's going to get better, though.
Yeah.
Wow. So Dan, I want to go to you for a minute, because U2 Music and these companies, they don't know about VR, but everybody's saying we want to do VR, we want to do 360.
Yeah.
And by the way, there's a difference between 360 and VR, which we probably should have explained in the beginning. But VR is like virtual reality, and a headset is fully immersive. 360 tends to be monoscopic or stereoscopic with a cardboard. Wikipedia it. So to make the audience do the work. But how do clients react when they say, we just want to do VR? Right. Do they know anything about quality? How do you get them to spend the money to create? How do you explain the technology to them?
There's like 6 subjects in that question. But so, I mean, for us, doing the first 360 with Slash, in 2014, and all the education, everyone's like, what is this? Because we're music industry focused, and it was just like, okay, let's just set up all these meetings with all the labels and the agents and bring the kits in and show them, because when you text them or email or whatever, they're not getting it, So you put them in it and they're like, mind is blown, we gotta do something like this. But then at that point, the brands weren't really understanding either, so there was no funding. Right. It's like, how do we get them to pull the trigger to actually pay us to make this stuff? So it was a lot of let's go do a couple things to show them their brand.
So do you feel like that's gotten better though? Do you feel like you're getting paid for stuff now?
Oh yeah.
That's
In the
good.
last, year and a half, 2 years, most everything we're doing is branded. Like we did the thing for Pepsi and Shazam for the Super Bowl. We did the Hyundai commercial for the Super Bowl. The Pepsi piece is really interesting. We actually partnered with Shazam, integrated our tech into Shazam's app.
Wow.
So we designed this CGI football field experience with hotspots for Lady Gaga.
Fun.
And how you activate it is by Shazamming your television.
Wow.
So we've turned Shazam into a distribution platform basically for VR.
So
very nice.
numbers. In other words, the money that they spend has to be backed up. Ratings, and there is no as far as I know, there may be a CPM, but there's no CIM immersive. so how do you measure results from the tech standpoint and being able to monitor the audience and what those numbers are? Do they count right now? Or
Most of the clients that we have that we're working with, or the partners that we have, like Universal and Shazam, they see it as a cool press piece as well, and that's currency to them.
So it's kind of marketing and PR, not necessarily for revenues.
But the numbers are happening too. When we launched Vertigo for Universal Music Group, we built their entire platform. vrtgo.com is the browser version. It's on all platforms. The launch of it was Avenged Sevenfold playing on the roof of Capitol Records, and then we had a lounge on the ground level with 50 Samsung Gear VR headsets, and the kids were able to transport themselves to the roof.
Fun.
But that was also out to the world. So we had 300,000 people actually tune into that at the same time through headsets, through YouTube, through the Vertigo app.
Wow.
And they were blown away by those numbers.
So making decisions in the future. In other words, content will drive take up. It has to, right? That's the whole reason people would subscribe to HBO. I did because I wanted to see From the Earth to the Moon. I'm going to ask you all, is it, other than games, is it music and sports that are is it live content that's going to drive people's participation? Is it narrative? Is it drama? Is it episodic?
I think it's all of that. I think that, the experiences, the more the intense the experiences get, and then when you start adding interactivity and haptics and things like that, you need to get people to feel it.
So we know what haptics is, but let's explain haptics.
Haptics are
Look
when
at
you
us.
get feedback, feedback in some way attached to the experience.
So it's like when you're holding a game controller and it vibrates,
right.
But this is much more intense.
That's right. Like when I play Super Hot, the game controller feels like the gun to me. So when I have to drop the gun, I end up throwing the game controller because you really feel it. So I think that for me, it's about the content, and it's about what's going to drive the content, what is going to be compelling content, what do people want to watch, and I think that we're getting a smattering of all different types of content, and as everybody's pushing the boundaries, more people can start consuming the content. But I also think that the headsets need to come down, and game players need to come down, and there needs to be
a little bit more comfortable
exactly,
and play. Yeah. Let's talk about there are friction points with this technology, and I'm in the game, so to speak. I'm in the game, and I go, I got to turn on the computer, I got to put on the headset, I got to, and how do we get over that?
Well, in the tech, we have a showroom that's just designed to educate people on headsets, educate people on how to get into an experience, what happens, and it is friction. It is absolutely friction. Half the time you're strangling someone with it because it's tethered. So we need to start moving more towards mobile, and I think that will.
There are wireless options now for the vein. Mm-hmm. Yes, Serena.
So just to answer your question, where the content is going, I think that the content, certain types of content will drive participation. And you'll want to turn on your computer to do it, okay? I think episodic, for me personally, is going to be one to do that. When you have companies like Amazon, other companies entering the area and actually producing episodic content, that's when people will actually be really, like the mainstream is coming.
But they're not really, nobody's really, going back to Marcia's comment, it's early. And these production companies, nobody's like really pulling the trigger.
One year.
Sorry?
1
year. That's it.
Well, you heard it here, folks. So we're going to have Irena back next year, and we're going to say, you said so, and if you're wrong, your business will have to go into virtual reality.
She's saying it's been a year. It's
No, she's saying in 1 year.
I'm saying in 1 year, you're going to get companies like Amazon and others.
So, and will that quality be high quality content enough that people want to go into it?
There have been some episodic content already shown that perhaps isn't at the top of the game, and then 1 year into it, it's going to get much better. So yes.
Right. I want to shift to post-production for a minute, because post-production in VR can be as much as a third of your budget right now.
Absolutely.
And it's intense. And traditional post-production people are beginning to understand how challenging and how non-automated a lot of the post-production process is. Is that changing, Marcy? What needs to be automated now?
I mean, traditional 360 live action camera is a very typical post-production workflow, less the stitching. So I think the cameras are getting better. I think live stitching is getting a lot better. I think it's still very early. And so people have to put the products out there to see how they're working. But I think that each camera is getting better as we get new cameras.
Is there a proper collaboration going on and consultation between camera manufacturers and content creators?
I think so. I think those conversations are taking place. I know they're taking place at the Tech.
So what I find fascinating is that all these younger filmmakers are now jumping into VR, some with traditional backgrounds, some coming from like YouTube creators that just want to jump in.
Right.
So there is this barrage of VR content coming on right now. In terms of technology, and maybe you can answer this, Irena, discovery is almost impossible.
Discovery.
Again, not the network, of content. Where is the technology to solve search and find and discovery?
Distribution is a huge issue right now. Okay, everybody's complaining about it. So something is going to improve because people are working on it now. We don't have all the details because, again, a lot of this is being done secretly because the competition is going to be so fierce. But this is going to be cracked. This nut is going to be cracked. And once we figure out how distribution is going to work and then monetization on top of that, then we actually have a full business model.
So in the distribution, we've got a few minutes left. In the distribution, you have the platforms. You have Oculus 5, Samsung Video, Oculus on Samsung. You have Little Star, you have Jaunt, you have Weaver. They're more content aggregators. You have the platforms, the content aggregators, and then you have the individual applications for mobile that Discovery, Nat Geo, CNN, the New York Times. What are people supposed to do? How are we educating consumers about which technology to use, or aren't we?
You want me to take that?
That was a tough question. You got like 2 minutes.
I think it's about the phone. Right now, when you know you want to go get an app, you know where to get the app. When you know where you want to look at a piece of content, if you want to find the content, you can find the content. Is it messy? Yeah, it's a little messy out there.
But there's less education for consumer behavior on a behavior that they're already doing, which is watching video on your phone. And now, I mean, you can literally text a number to Jaunt and it will open a piece of content, open the application and open that piece of content on your phone. So they've eliminated some of that friction. But modifying consumer behavior and friction points, you got high end, low end, where we...
Okay, so it's not going to be right now.
Yeah.
It's going to be at least 6 months to a year, all right? Remember where cable used to be before it was like HBO? Young. I remember. Yeah. I'm telling everyone. Before then, it was just a bunch of people getting on their cable, whatever, those little like not so great shows that were showing.
Yep.
HBO came and need somebody with a lot of money to come in and do the distribution thing right, and others will follow.
Right.
Okay, great.
And I'm not so sure it's just one company who's going to create this entire ecosystem. It's going to take a lot of us. It's going to take money. It's going to take time.
I can just tell you from our perspective what it's been like with the clients. Well, first it's the education of how do we get this to people and who's going to watch this thing. And the low-hanging fruit for us has been, the last couple of years doing web VR sites. Just a link that they could push out.
Yeah, a whole other thing to talk about.
Which has been really great, which gives us the design. Now we've designed it And now when they're ready, then we can go and develop for PlayStation and Google Daydream and all of that. But then it's like, okay, well, how do people even know about this stuff? And it's, for us, it's the artists.
Well,
the artists tweet, and then the people come.
Right.
Welcome to the great frontier. We're all on the edge of it. It's a lot of fun. You got to admit, it's a lot of fun. And I have to say, Marcy and I worked together. Not once did we have a disagreement because everybody had the same goal in mind. It was really amazing. And hacking to make that technology work.
Yep.
Dan Saxton from VR Live, Rena Curran from Spout Reality, and Marcy Jastro from the Technicolor Experience Center. Thank you so much for being with us today. It is the Wild West. There's a lot of information out there. You can find it by just looking on the web or looking on Facebook. You are watching NAB Show live from Las Vegas, and we'll be right back.
Are you ready?
Thank you.
Start up there and then come down.
There you go. There you go, Ryan. That's it.
Ryan Saddles here with NAB Show Live at the Pebble Beach Systems booth. How you doing, Eric?
Good to see you, Ryan.
All right, so the Eric Openshaw, we chatted with this guy many times. Pebble Beach is a very innovative company. What are you guys doing at NAB Show?
It's a really exciting show for us this year, Ryan. We've actually got a few new things going on. One of the highlights is our first public cloud demo with the IBM Cloud. We're actually sending a live feed from the booth up to an IBM data center that is running our Orca virtualized integrated channel. We've got a web-based user interface here on the booth. We're taking the program output back to the booth so we can show our guests demos of that. We're also showcasing our 4K capabilities within our Dolphin integrated channel. And also we're evolving the feature set within the integrated channel to bring more of the best-of-breed functionality on board. And right behind you we have our first ever public appearance of the integration of ROS expression graphics on board Dolphin.
So what does NAB Show mean to a company like Pebble Beach Systems?
You know, it's really a unique opportunity for us to meet the industry and demonstrate our leadership within the industry, both with the product suite, the offerings that we have, and the things that we're doing to help our customers move their media businesses forward in this very dynamic landscape.
Okay, so as far as products go, I know that Dolphin is an extremely popular product. Let's go more in depth about what you guys do with other products.
So, yeah, Dolphin is our core integrated channel product. We also have a virtualized variant of that, which is what we call Orca.
That's right.
So we have both of those integrated channel products effectively sit under our Marina automation system. So that's the brains of the system. And then what we're also showing here at NAB is the integration of a workflow and asset management system that is integrated into the Marina ecosystem to enable upstream file-based workflows, transcoding, auto QC, and so on.
So it's quite exciting how the world has evolved, right, from an analog world to a digital world, and now asset management is no longer with what I used to call them tape logs when I worked in post-production. We had all these logs of beta tapes and 3/4 and all that, and now it's all digital. Isn't that amazing?
Yeah, you know, it is really a fast-changing landscape, both on that side, but also in the IP space. We don't have a single SCI cable on the booth this year, or last year for that matter. So certainly that push into IP video transport is something that is very important to the industry and something that we're investing a lot in keeping up with.
So how do you help clients migrate? I'm sure that happens all the time, right? You're dealing with older facilities, rebuilding stations or production studios.
Absolutely. The key to that is that all of the different channel technologies that we support sit under the same Marina automation system. So whether it's a third-party best-of-breed baseband channel, an integrated channel, a virtualized channel, it's the same control system, the same user interfaces, and that allows us to put in systems that sit on one generation of technology and allow the facility to migrate into IP and virtualized-based channel technology without interrupting operations, maintaining the same workflows, and so on.
Okay, so Where'd you come? Where you guys based out of, actually?
Based out of the UK, and we have our US headquarters in Denver.
Okay, so you're in Denver, right?
Correct, yeah.
Okay, so your trip here, you've been here a few days, you guys get set up. The excitement, you see the vibe that's going, there's a lot of people here. I think everybody's going to do very well at this show. You agree?
Yeah, it's looking like it's going to be a really busy one. The show floor's packed, and we're looking forward to a busy week.
All right, broadcasting live from the Pebble Beach booth here at in South Hall. Thank you so much, Eric Openshaw.
Thank you, Ryan.
And we'll chat soon.
Yep.
Again, from South Hall, back to the studio.
Live from Las Vegas, this is NAB Show Live, produced by Broadcast Beat.
Good afternoon. Welcome to NAB. We are broadcasting NAB Show live from the grand lobby of Central Hall in the MetaFX studio. I'm happy to have you back. This segment is going to be about the state of the industry, VR industry, AR industry, and content. And I have 4 glorious guests right now with me. You know, it really annoys me that we don't have a woman on this panel, but we did have 2 women on the last one. So we have Armando Kerwin from Milk VR. Can you tell us a little bit about Milk VR?
Sure. We make cinematic VR.
Okay.
And I've been in the industry for a few years. I've seen it from a couple of different areas, so I look forward to talking about it.
Great. Tony Megavero from Little Star. Tell us about Little Star.
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, there we go.
You're in. You're on.
Yeah, cool. Yeah, Little Star. Yeah, we're a premium distribution network for 360 content and VR content. Work with all the big broadcasters, have apps across all the VR headsets as well as mobile, televisions, web. Also have a platform that all the big networks and publishers build their VR initiatives on top of our platform. So that's us.
So you're involved with helping content get distributed, essentially.
We do that.
Which
we
is part of the
content.
equation.
That's right.
So.
That's right.
Then we have Chris Babitis from Metal. A lot of people would say you can't do VR without it. And it looks like you're like a walking brand today. So welcome, Chris. Tell us a little bit about Metal and the software and how it enables VR before we start talking about the content.
You bet. So I have 2 clients here, actually, which is wonderful. Yeah, we're the go-to solution, I think, right now, and pretty much the industry leader in content creation tools for Cinematic 360 VR. We just announced collaboration with Facebook on all that is depth in 360, and we're quite excited about it.
What does that mean? All that is depth in 360.
Okay, so stereoscopic acquisition along with depth information that's acquired on set and created in the cloud makes its way to content creators. So that parlays into depth of field, which is something that we've been wanting in this space, in this medium. Things like depth-based masking, volumetric effects like fog and mist and all this kind of stuff, interesting stuff. More importantly, it creates a much more rich experience with 60OF, so 6 degrees of freedom. So the actual playback will be a lot better, a lot richer.
So many expressions in that brief explanation. So I want to go back to just a little bit about the technology, and then we'll get into the content. So first of all, acquiring the image and the depth information, the camera's sensors do that. Depending upon the number of cameras that you are using in VR, because you are shooting in 360, you have to get all that information. You not only have to stitch the image, but you're talking about essentially a more realistic, less artifact-oriented image, correct? Which would lead to a better content experience.
Absolutely.
So, and Facebook is distributed also in the Gear VR and in Oculus, correct?
Correct.
And what about on HTC Vive? Is it there yet?
You can view content on the Vive, but Facebook's not affiliated to that, right?
Right.
So I mean, our player is sort of agnostic. We support the Rift and we support the Vive. So whatever 60OF tech makes its way to the Vive player automatically makes it over to
60OF. So 6 degrees of freedom.
Yeah.
What does that mean?
If I'm looking at you right now, right, I can actually start to move this away and that away and move up and down and forward and back and actually get better depth perception and actually get renders
So
of the side of your face.
it's like real life. So 6 degrees of freedom. If I want to look behind Armando,
not yet.
A year ago, a year ago I couldn't even fathom that.
No.
But now that is coming.
Yep.
Okay, great. So that's
light fields, light. That's a big buzz term, right?
Light fields.
Light fields, right? In CG, it's very attainable right now. In real world acquisition, not so much. It's not as accessible as it could be. This is the beginnings of it, moving towards that. So more volumetric experiences where
volumetric, explain, please.
So eventually, as the tech evolves and grows, yes, I will be able to look behind Tony.
So volumetric scans the image,
yes,
and actually allows you to put that scanned image in your content.
Correct.
So that actually I am relating to a body rather than just a flat image or even a stereoscopic image. There's more to that image.
Absolutely.
Okay, great. Thank you.
My pleasure.
I just for anybody that doesn't understand VR, we all know what we're talking about. We talk about it every day, but
in its simplest form as well. I mean, if you look at cinematic, we've been using depth of field as a storytelling technique forever and a day.
Yes.
Well, it's made its way into spherical as well now.
Yes,
right?
that's POV.
Yeah.
So, okay, Alex Meter, creative director from Perception Squared, a filmmaker, just like Armando. So we have two filmmakers bookending, a distributor and a technologist, and I mean that in the nicest way, Chris. Alex, when you came from traditional film, so what do you bring from traditional film into making content, and how is it different?
It's very different. There's a lot of tools in traditional cinema that you get very used to using, things like close-ups, things like macro shots, camera movement that are either non-existent or very limited in the VR space. You can't really do a close-up the way you would in a traditional film, so you have to figure out how are you going to get into that character's headspace? How do you get that intimacy? How do you see that subtlety of performance and not just have everything be 6 feet away from you? Camera motion's really hard, being able to dynamically move through scenes. Even simple things like blocking and sort of, the way a scene plays out, just editing is very different. You have a lot longer cuts in VR content, so you can't use montage as much. You kind of have to think about the way you edit and the way you construct stories just from a very basic level. You have to conceptualize it very differently.
But you and Connor Hare, your partner, you guys are kind of known for, I want to say, pulling, and in the interest of full disclosure, we produced My Brother's Keeper together for PBS Digital Studios. But you guys are kind of known for pulling cinematic technique into, and we'll talk about film noir in a minute, into virtual reality. Are those calculated moves that you make? Do you think, okay, this will work? Do you make each other sick when you're testing stuff?
We do try to test, and we try to do a lot of experimenting. Like, this is a very new medium, so there's a lot of uncharted ground. We're trying to... Cinema has 100 years of language behind it, like from the very first films. Like, we've been experimenting, and it took a long time to build that language, and there's a lot of social and sort of cultural absorption of that language. And so we try to pull from that language of traditional cinema and find ways that we can sort of adapt that into VR so that we sort of have a starting point of like the words of the language, but there's a lot of it that still has to be written. There's a lot of things that still need to be explored. So we're always trying, like, what happens if we put a camera on a technocrane? Can we do that? How can we figure out how to do that? How can we put it on a drone? How can we, create a POV? It's the best way to use stereo. Like, on My Brother's Keeper, we did monoscopic portion of the frame and a stereoscopic as a sort of an attempt to...
Difference between monoscopic and stereoscopic,
monoscopic is this, stereoscopic is this.
Look into camera.
That's the silliest thing I've ever done on camera. Stereoscopic has sense of depth with 2 eyes, and monoscopic is just a flat image. So in spherical, it's a flat image projected spherically, whereas stereoscopic is basically 2 spheres, 1 for each eye. So you have a sense of depth and distance to things. So with that, the idea was to put the stereoscopic zone in front and kind of pull people's attention forward, because we found that focus is one of the harder things in the narrative side of VR. Keeping people focused on an area, keeping them from getting distracted by the shark swimming by and missing part of the story. So we're constantly trying to experiment and find new ways that we can sort of play with what the audience is experiencing and bring some of those cinematic language tools into VR in a different way, and also try to find new types of tools that can sort of tell stories in dynamic ways.
So I addressed this question to Tony and Armando. Alex has just talked about what audiences are used to.
Okay.
Do you think that audiences in VR, coming into VR, have an expectation of that cinematic quality and might be disappointed if they don't see that?
I think so. I mean, particularly like suspension of disbelief, right? So in traditional film, going back, you're talking about the 100-year history of cinema, we have this idea of suspension of disbelief. which means you can do things so long as you don't break the illusion and take the audience out of it. So what's happening with VR is we're kind of evaluating all of these new technologies from that exact same perspective with the additional wrinkle of immersion. So if you look at the immersive technologies that we're adopting, we're saying, can we utilize this immersive technology without kind of violating suspension of disbelief in VR? So like Sixtoff is an example where I think it's going to work because it's just kind of an incremental improvement on your sensation of presence, but other technologies might not.
So, but when you're talking about being immersed, and you still want willing suspension of disbelief, your body is going along with where you are. So, I mean, I know from our piece, from My Brother's Keeper, and even in Eilionoir, which we'll talk about in a second, you are present. So your disbelief, you might not have to suspend your disbelief so much because by virtue of being in it, you're already in it.
Yeah, and so what we're trying to figure out is how does this work? How do we bring in agency without violating suspension of disbelief? And that's kind of the $1 million question right now. And that's why we have this binary right now between games where you have total agency and cinematic VR, which is largely static but does deal with issues of embodiment. And somewhere in the middle is probably where VR is going to end up, right? So
and when you say somewhere in the middle, can you describe what that experience would be?
Well, that's what we're all trying to figure out. But essentially, how do we take, so video games don't have people in them, so we know that we'll probably have cinematic elements. And perhaps those are light fields of people that are mixed in with game engines or something. But what we're trying to do is figure out what that middle is. And most likely, it's some form of cinematic and interactive and possibly game engine. And that's what VR becomes over the next few years. But we have to do all of that while still keeping you in the story.
So you had a piece come out that you did with the New York Times Magazine, correct?
Yes.
Called Eilionoir. It was taking film noir and bringing the principles of film noir, lighting and all of that. And lighting is a big deal in VR. Right. I mean, a real big deal in VR. And you pulled it off. It's a beautiful piece.
Thank you.
The other thing I wanted to ask you is, we're trying to drive audiences to take up. So this had a lot of celebrities in it. And what was the result? And some really good acting. So what was the result of that? How was that received?
Well,
and a big risk for the New York Times.
It was a big risk. It was the biggest project, and they're very active in VR, and it was, in fact, the biggest project they've ever done. And we had Natalie Portman and Kristen Stewart and Don Cheadle and people like that in the films. And, from a distribution perspective, we were playing with those models that make sense for movies. In other words, celebrity draw to help get as many people as possible to see it. But to be honest, the whole industry is still very much constrained by the number of headsets. So even though we had something that theoretically could draw a larger crowd, that large crowd is still small.
So here's my question. So when clients come to us, Storytech Immersive, they're like, okay, we'll shoot in 360, which conceivably could be, and not stereoscopic and not like the highest resolution stereoscopic. And our recommendation is, you're gonna need library content later on. This stuff is going to be valuable. Why not spend the money now and shoot in the highest resolution and highest stereoscopic capabilities that are available now, because, and we'll talk about distribution in a second, because you can distribute it all the way down to 360. Is that a viable recommendation to clients?
Yeah, I mean, that's essentially, I've done over 20 projects now with 4 different production companies, and that's basically the model. Because if you're already in production and you add another kind of tier, it doesn't double the budget to deliver something else, particularly if you know in advance that that's what you're going to do.
But your budget in post is going to be more for stereoscopic than it's going to be for 360.
But you're talking about maybe a 20% increase in the budget to allow you to have both formats, so it's not a big savings.
And to allow you an asset that you can use later on.
Right, and that'll go down.
So Little Star is an application. And the way things are distributed now, we talked a little about this on the last segment, the way things are distributed now is you have the platforms, so you have HTC Vive, you have Oculus, you have Samsung Gear VR, and you have basically these are the big ones, and Google Daydream and Sony PlayStation VR. Then you have the aggregators of content like Little Star or Jaunt. You guys are basically the leaders, and that application appears across multiple platforms. And then the other thing is that some of the clients you work with also have their own applications on mobile phones or their own applications inside the platforms. This is crazy for consumers to try and figure out where to watch something and what to watch it on. So how does Little Star work to educate consumers and storytellers and content creators?
Yeah, I mean, we founded the company on the fact that we couldn't find any experiences ourselves, and when there was a Rift developer kit, and we couldn't find any of the experiences ourselves, and so from a consumer perspective, we tried to improve the discovery of content, and then from a content owner's perspective or a producer's studio's perspective. Nobody on that side wants to think about distributing the content, and especially when it has to do with the nuances of incorporating SDKs across all the app stores.
It's hard.
Getting approval from every single one of them for every one of the experiences that you want to release, and so it's super annoying for a content owner to have to do that over and over again. So we built a single place to do that, and have been dedicated to that since the beginning. And so the education happens on both sides. I mean, we generally, as you're talking about getting master assets that are as stereoscopic 8K master files, we want that as well coming into our system, because we then have to bounce it out to 80 different versions and wrap it up in Dash or HLS, and now
Dash,
we're dealing with now we're dealing
define
dynamic adaptive streaming, basically.
Okay.
And
which
then
allows things to stream and not make you sick at a certain frame rate per second that doesn't.
Yeah, and then you can do all kinds of things with that, like incorporate different packages of streams of video and audio that adapt based on the viewing environment. And so that's not an easy thing to do for content owners who just want to create great content and get it as far and wide as they possibly can.
Yeah, it's a great solution because, even in our own distribution experience, we're constantly we had to make a grid of all the different deliveries, and while I won't even go to talk about sound in the different devices, I want to talk about this, all of a sudden, this proliferation and discussion of VR arcades. You've got HTC going to open 1,000 VR arcades in China. You have Sony that's done very successfully with the IMAX VR experience in Los Angeles. How is this going to drive content? What are the differences? How do you make your content go into an experience like that? We actually went, Alex and I and Connor, we had a great time, but there's mostly games in there, and there is this craving now for cinematic content. What has to be different in terms of content creation if it's going inside of arcades, or does it not have to be different at all?
Let me just say something that really crucial that we've learned recently in the industry is that games are actually the smaller part of the market.
Do you hear that? Games are actually the smaller part of the market.
And that, going into VR, we had this idea that VR was games. And we all kind of ran with that for a while. But now that we actually have headsets in the wild, the data is telling us, this is from Samsung and Google, they're not being very vocal about this, but that gaming is in fact approximately 35% of the utilization in headset. So people like video, and that makes sense to me if you think of VR as a computing kind of paradigm. I don't always want to play games on my computer or my phone, so of course I'm going to watch video a lot of the time. So it seems reasonable in hindsight, even though we didn't think that way in the beginning. So now we're trying to figure out, knowing that, how can we evolve cinematic VR to make it worthwhile to go into something like an arcade?
I was never a gamer, so I only ever saw it as cinematic VR. I never really saw it as gaming. And I saw, been at this for 6 years already. And once the Samsung Gear VR came out and the promo video that Felix and Paul had made, then I was like, okay, this is now possible. More story, less experience, more story. I want to shift gears for a minute. I want to talk about 180 versus 360. because you and Connor are pretty much committed to both. So purists in the industry would say, well, it is 360, so you have to use the whole thing. What's the argument for 180?
There's a lot of different ways you can look at it. I think what Armando was saying about looking at VR as a platform, like you can do a lot of different things with a computer. You can watch video, you can play a game, you can run a spreadsheet. If you look at a VR headset the same way, like we kind of jumped into this idea that all video and live action content in VR needs to be 360, it needs to be fully immersive. And I definitely think there's some merit to that, but at the same time there are some things you can do when you're capturing in 180 that bring a lot of the cinematic tools and language back from traditional film that we think are really valuable, like things like better camera motion, being able to use lighting. I mean, obviously, you saw it from the piece Armando worked on, you can do lighting in 360. It's really hard. It's very challenging. It's just a lot of work to clean up afterwards. 180 is good from the technical side, but even more so if you look at it from a deeper level. Like the nature of narrative is kind of different than the nature of
it's the way we see
narrative. It is. When you give people a lot of choice, like the full choice of looking anywhere, you have the chance of missing things. Whereas if you have a certain limitation, sometimes you
I'm going to interrupt you and thank you all. We could have talked about this for hours. We have to go. You're watching NAB Show live from Las Vegas. Thank you, Alex, Chris, Tony, and Armando. We have to find another way to broadcast you guys.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks.